Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has arrived in India for a two-day visit that will include talks with her Delhi counterpart, Jaishankar. Likely topics on the agenda include global consequences of the war in Ukraine and India's relationship with China. They're also expected to discuss cooperation on reducing the use of fossil fuels. India took over the G20 presidency at the start of this month, and it's been trying to maintain good relations with both Russia and Western nations, and doesn't support Western sanctions against Moscow. Well, let's cross over to DW's South Asia Bureau Chief, Amrita Cheema in Delhi. Amrita, great to see you. Now, this is Annalena Baerbock's first visit to India as Foreign Minister. So what's on the agenda for her?
Yes, Pablo, this is her first visit to India, and it also coincides with India's first week as a president of the G20. So high expectations on both sides. You mentioned some of the things which are on the agenda. For India, fighting climate change is one of the core agendas of its presidency this year of the G20, and that resonates really well with Germany. They've already announced just last week they're going to spend 10 billion euros over the next 8 years on dealing with projects and initiatives to fight climate change. So that will be one key issue up for discussion. And then there'll be the international issues. For example, China. India's relations with China remain very tense along the border. And another issue which may come up is Kashmir. Now, Baerbock raised this issue a couple of times before she came here, and she talked about the UN's involvement in resolving the dispute between India and Pakistan over Kashmir. Now, this did not go down well at all in India, which sees this as a bilateral issue. So she did some damage limitation before she came here and said Germany's position on Kashmir remains unchanged. That means it's a bilateral issue. And of course, there'll be discussion on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And as well as she's also taking part in a panel discussion about Germany's perception of what is happening in the Indo-Pacific. So a lot of issues up for discussion.
Now, Amrita, on Friday, the EU, G7 and Australia agreed on a price cap on Russian oil. So what are the chances of India supporting this decision?
Very little, Pablo, because in fact this cap comes into effect today, December the 5th. The Indian Foreign Minister has repeatedly said that his responsibility lies to the consumers of India. And India is very energy hungry. It gets most of its crude from overseas. And before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, India was getting 0.02% of its energy from Russia. And now that's shot up to more than 20%. And India says this is not going to change anytime soon. And it's also, you have to keep in mind that India, countries like India and China, both are getting heavily discounted crude from Russia. So it's unlikely that the two countries are likely to exceed the threshold of $60 per barrel for Russian crude.
Amrita, India has close relations with the West as well as with Russia. So how is Delhi actually handling this political balancing act?
Initially, Pablo, it was a bit difficult for India. It wobbled a bit as it kind of walked the tight diplomatic rope. But increasingly, it's become more confident and even assertive because it realized at some point, at this very sensitive time, the West did not want to push India into a diplomatic corner. And once it realized this, after it had been defensive and awkward about the fact that it had repeatedly abstained in resolutions condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it suddenly became more confident and assertive and said, we can deal with it. And Modi's sentence to Putin that this is not the time of war resonated well with the West, and it's also become a part of the communique which came out of the Bali G20 summit.
Thanks, Amrita. DW's South Asia Bureau Chief, Amrita Cheema.